We're often told that World War II was inevitable, just this massive storm that had been gathering for years and couldn't be stopped. But what if that's not the whole story? What if the biggest, most destructive conflict in human history actually hinged on a single choice? And that's really the core of what we're digging into here. Because while Hitler's aggression was absolutely the spark, it was the reaction to that spark that truly set the world on fire. This wasn't some unstoppable force of nature. It was a very human story, full of pressure, fear, and some really high stakes. Exactly, and that's so important to remember. This wasn't some grand strategic move in a chess game. This was a decision made by leaders who were absolutely terrified of repeating the horrors of the past, and in doing so, they accidentally created a far, far more devastating future. So let's zero in on that exact moment, the one where a regional crisis spiraled out of control and became a global catastrophe. It wasn't the first move on the board, but it was the one that tipped the entire world into war. Okay, look closely at these dates because the gap is everything. September 1st, Germany invades Poland. But the World War doesn't actually start then. It starts 2 days later, on September 3rd. In those critical 48 hours, Britain and France had to make a choice, and that choice decided the fate of the world. I mean, from our perspective today, it seems like a no-brainer, right? A dictator invades a sovereign nation, you have to step in. But for the leaders back in 1939, it was anything but simple. They were completely haunted by the ghosts of the very recent past. To really get why they hesitated, you have to understand the fear. I mean, a deep, collective fear. The entire continent of Europe was living in the shadow of a conflict so horrific, they literally called it the war to end all wars. Think about this. World War I had wiped out an entire generation. It shattered economies. People were just exhausted, right down to their bones. The idea of going through all of that again was an absolute nightmare. So every single political decision was seen through one lens. We have to avoid another war, no matter what. And that powerful, desperate desire to avoid another war led directly to this policy, appeasement. Now, today that word sounds weak, naive, but you have to remember, at the time, a lot of people saw it as the only sane and logical path forward. It was a strategy born out of total desperation. And right here, this is the fatal flaw in the whole plan. The logic, the hope was pretty simple. Okay, let's just give Hitler what he says he wants, like parts of Czechoslovakia. Surely then he'll be satisfied. But the message that actually sent was something totally different. It told him loud and clear that aggression works, that he could just take whatever he wanted and no one would fight back. But you can only back up so far. Eventually, you reach a point where the cost of doing nothing feels even riskier than the cost of taking action. A line had to be drawn in the sand, and that line was the border of Poland. This is what made Poland the final straw. See, after giving Hitler part of Czechoslovakia, he broke his promise just 6 months later and took the rest of it. That moment proved he couldn't be trusted or reasoned with. So Britain and France made a public ironclad guarantee to protect Poland. When Germany invaded anyway, it wasn't just about Poland anymore. It was about their word, their credibility on the world stage. Backing down again would have been a total humiliation. So they made the choice. They declared war. They truly believed they were stopping a tyrant and preventing an even worse outcome down the road. But that one single decision triggered a chain reaction that nobody, absolutely nobody, could control. And you can see how it just snowballed. Declaring war didn't just challenge Hitler. Ironically, it actually helped him rally the German people behind him. Then, that whole complex web of alliances just clicked into place. Britain and France didn't just bring themselves into the fight. They brought their massive global empires and colonies with them. And just like that, a European border dispute became a true world war. It was like a set of dominoes that, once it started falling, was simply impossible to stop. Now, looking back, it's so easy for us to sit here and judge the choices they made. But the real lesson here, the thing that still matters today, is understanding what it's like to make a decision when you are under unimaginable pressure. And this right here, this is the tragic irony of the whole story. The intense fear of repeating World War I led them to make choices, first appeasement, then the declaration of war, that ultimately unleashed a conflict that was exponentially worse. The war wasn't some destiny that was bound to happen. It happened because people made a choice. It might have been made with the best of intentions, but it had catastrophic results. Once that switch was flipped on the tracks, there was just no going back. And that kind of leaves us with this really heavy question, doesn't it? The leaders in 1939 were trapped. They were staring at one terrible option and another one that seemed even worse. It's a dilemma that leaders still face all the time. It really makes you wonder, when you're facing a bad situation, how do you pick a path that doesn't just lead to an even bigger disaster?